Hey everybody, welcome back to Omens. I'm your host Ryan, AM Air Pronouns, and this is episode 39, the King of Wands. And okay, I just gotta say, uh, I was as I was driving here to the library today to record, I was thinking, and I was like, I suddenly realized actually when I was looking at my notes and shit, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for over a year now. Which is kind of amazing. Last month during August was actually that's basically my anniversary, and I completely fucking missed it. I was like, okay, I gotta do what's this astrology sign? Oh, it's Virgo. Oh, wait a second, I've already done Virgo. So yeah, happy 1 year and 1 month anniversary to me. I guess I totally freaking missed it last month. So yeah, thanks to all of you who've been here since the beginning. I don't know if that's many or if they're ones who were here at the beginning or even still watching or what. But if you're just finding this, hey, um, I've been doing this for over a year. I think I'm doing all right. Apparently, a lot. It's one of the podcasts I listen to, Wildly Tarot, and they kind of did a sort of a personal study. They're like most like say this was based on podcasts, but they're like they were going through some older podcasts and stuff on the Apple Journey, like back when they were trying to get some of their reviews up, and they're like a lot of podcasts like they quit after about 20 episodes or so. So if you get past that, you're already up and up. So I'm like, well, I'm at 39 videos here today, so I guess I got over the hurdle of 20, and I've definitely made it past a year of fairly regular episodes. I've only missed one so far due to mental health issues. And yeah, um, I had a couple of fifth week extras, but those don't really count. So, as I'm sure you can tell, I didn't get to do the fifth week extra that I was thinking about possibly doing, but at the same time, like, gosh, I totally forgot that it even existed, so I didn't have anything planned for it. But yeah, so thank y'all for being here if you're watching this, and but yeah, I'm excited. So here's to hopefully another year, and I mean, I guess since I'm already a month in, or well, yeah, basically a month in because end of August, beginning of September. So, oh, all right, now that that's all done and over with, 3 minutes of that shit. Let's dive into the King of Wands. A year and a month in, and we're finally reaching the end of the Wands cards. Well, technically, since this is card 14 of the Wands, we're basically 2 months in. So, um, yeah. So the King of Wands. I don't have my cards. Wow. Got everything out and prepped, and I forgot to actually grab the freaking cards. Alright, so now that I have them, first up, as per usual, is the Numerology, and we have my Hush Tarot King of Wands here for that, or kind of King of Spears. I mean, it's still called Wands, but they look like spears to me, so, eh. And same kind of iconography. It's a long staff. Just spears happen to have pointy, sharp, pointy ends, as opposed to a staff, which is usually a just blunt end. But anyway, wands, spears, staffs, meh. So the numerology, technically, of course, as I've mentioned before, court cards don't actually have numerology per se, but I'm throwing it in here because one, I like the numerology, and two, I think it adds a little bit of flavor. Um, so the Hush Tarot here is a songbird. I'm not sure what type. I'm not exactly an ornithologist or know much about birds. I can tell if it's a prey bird or a predator bird or a dangerous bird, aka swans, geese, and the like. So, or a big bird, which is also dangerous. So, all I know is it's a type of songbird. I'm assuming swallow of some sort. I probably could pull out the Hush book now that I think about it. I actually have that on me. Reach, reach. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's it. I can tell these by feel. Okay, so... no, that is the Wands. Alright, so the King of Wands... It doesn't have anything about the art. Well, that was useless. Okay, so I don't know what type of bird it is besides brown songbird. And it is holding a red thread. It's standing on a tall stalk of grass holding a red thread, which is all kind of tangled down around the grass, the stalk, and its feet. And coming out of the mouth of a person lying down on the ground. Now, all we can see of this person is just the nose, mouth, and chin type deal. A little bit of hair, or no hair. Sorry, that is actually a knight chess piece. It's just the top of the head of the horse. You can kind of you can tell it's a chess piece though. So anyway, we've got a bird that's pulling out red thread out of the mouth of a I'm going to assume deceased person just because they have thread in their mouth, but given that this deck's art style might not actually be somebody who's deceased. So it could be a living person or a mannequin or what have you. All we can see is the nose, mouth, and chin. So we've got a bird pulling string out of a person's mouth that's lying on the ground. So that's the Hush. That's the card that we're using for the numerology here. And the numerology, if we numbered these cards, the King would be number 14. So we're gonna split that. We're gonna break that number down, and build it up, and yada yada. So in Pythagorean numerology, obviously, we split this into 1 plus 4 equals 5. So we can split that up into what is the 1, what's the 4, and what's the 5. So the 1, as we've gone over before, has to do with ego, the self, the mathematical point. It's the first physical number, and it has to do with our verbal communication. It's when the 1, of course, is when things come into being. It's the leadership number. It's the self number. It's all about the single contained person and the single contained entity. And it's also a physical number. The 4 is also a physical number, so we've got double physical here. And the 4, however, is the center of the physical number. So whereas the 1 is the leading physical number, like the start of it, if we think about it in kind of astrological terms, we could say the 1 is what's the word I'm looking for? It's associated with the card. It could be compared to the cardinal signs. So it's the leading, the beginning, that which starts something. And the 4 could be compared or contrasted to the fixed signs. They're in the middle. They sit there, they actually get stuff done. The 4 is associated with orderliness and practicality and organizing, of actually building things, of saying, we've started this, we're going to finish it. We're going to work this all the way through. We're going to get all the little details done, dot the I's, cross the T's. We're going to get this perfect, fixed, and set in stone. So the 4 is all about the organizing. These are both very heavily physical numbers, both of them. 1 is a leading physical number that has to do with the self. The next one is okay, now we build. We've got our self, now we're building. Now 1 plus 4 equals 5. And in Pythagorean numerology, 5 is the soul number. It's the seat of the soul. It's the center of the numerological birth chart in Pythagorean numerology, which looks like a tic-tac-toe square, and the 5 is right there in the center, where it's completely contained on all sides inside a square, which is also associated with a 4. So that 4, that constriction and orderliness, contains the 5, which is like, whoa, no, break out of here. The 5's struggle and purpose is to break free. It's associated with the heart chakra, so it's the number of love, and it's also the number of freedom. Because it's contained, its job is to break free. Type deal. It's symbolism. Is to break free, become new, introduce chaos into the order. So we've got this very, so we've got both order and the self, and both of those coming together. That need for individuality the one has introduces chaos into the need for structure and order that the four has. So it's both. It's both. It's all of the above. The one plus the four create the five. So the individuality plus the order creates the need for freedom of expression. Now, the 14 as a whole number by and of itself, this is where we have to turn to non-Pythagorean numerology. And if you look up, if you just kind of Google meaning of numbers 10 and above, you start coming into angelic numerology and angel numerology. So that's what I got to go to, because that's pretty much the only numerology that goes, that really starts exploring numbers above 9 for the most part. As far as I can tell, there might be others that I'm just missing, but that's the one that's got like 3 pages of numerology if you just look up meaning of number 14. So the 14 is associated with Mercury and Sagittarius, which is in and of itself interesting. So just going after that, it's associated with knowledge and travel, because Mercury is both the planet of intellectual thought, communication, speed, travel, yada yada yada. Sagittarius wants to explore the unknown, wants to yeah, it wants to, again more with that again with that knowledge thing. If Sagittarius wants to just explore, learn things, build, as the philosopher, the teacher, and such. Um, I'm going rather fast on this. Okay, but meh. So, and that 14 is basically known as a number that has intense energy that needs directing. It needs a direction, or otherwise it'll become destructive, because Mercury is speedy, Sagittarius is mutable fire. So mutable sign, as we know, is very chaotic, easily transitions. Mercury is speed going every which way. It's associated with both another mutable sign, Gemini, and with Virgo, which is technically a fixed earth sign. That one is, which Virgo in itself, that's the practicality of Mercury, the details. So again, we have that detail oriented. So the 14, kind of a 1 plus 4 equals 5 again. So we've broken it down, we built it back up. The angelic numerology kind of all comes together. Now to apply that to this card, this is, if I were to apply this numerology to this card, so we've got the 1, which is individual, 4, which is building and practicality, and 5, which is freedom of expression. So this individual bird here at the top is pulling creativity out of this foundation. Okay, so if we say this person down here is kind of the foundation, the practicality, the 4, which is kind of stable, unmoving, doesn't really want to change, but because of their need for expression, to let loose this creativity, which is this thread, which is, if we represent this thread as the 5, this is the creativity, the freedom, the wanting to break loose and free out of the mouth of this person. It's like they've been containing all this in all this beauty, and they want it to get out, but because they're so stuck on the ground, they need that small part of their soul, the bird, which also represents freedom, to pull their creativity out and fly with it, to go places. It's like, this is our individual self, and we're going to fly free and create something with this stuff that comes from our stable selves. So that's kind of how I'd apply the numbers to this card. All right, moving on. And I'm feeling that fire from the King of Wands, because As y'all have probably figured out by now, and as I've started figuring out, I tend to embody the cards that I'm talking about or whatever I'm talking about. I get into their energy. All right, so next up are the kings. What do the kings themselves represent? And for that, we have my Black Cat Tarot. And I was looking at my cards today in Black Cat Tarot, and I realized so they've got kind of symbols up here for what's a king and what's a queen, and page and knight. Page and knight are easy enough to figure out. The page has got a hood, the knight's got a horse head. King and the queen are where it gets a little complicated because one's got a crown, the other's got the sphere of royalty, of leadership. And I'm pretty sure I gave a reading not too long ago, whereas I called, um, I'm pretty sure looking at it now, I'm like, you know what? I think that sphere is supposed to represent the kings, not the crown. And I gave somebody a reading talking about how it was the Queen of Swords, and actually I realize now it was actually the King of Swords, but it's actually kind of difficult to tell. I was looking at the two cards, the Queen and the King, and I was like, huh, it's really hard to apply as to which is which, but um, just going off of the sphere, usually the ball with the crown on it usually mean or the cross on it usually means this is the rulership. This is the ruler. I'm associating that with the king. So, and given the picture of the other one versus this one, I'm like, yeah, this one's the king. So, whoops, I called it a queen. It was actually the king. My bad. But anyway, so in the Black Cat Tarot, we have a cat standing in front of a stone throne with a wand sitting on it, kind of just laid across the armchair. So he's standing up in front of it at a stone anvil, or well, an iron anvil, and they're looking up at the object that they've just created, which is a iron rose. It's actually very beautifully detailed, and it's interesting how very delicate and detailed this is because they're at an anvil with a giant forge hammer. So it's like, how did you create something this delicate and beautiful with a fucking hammer? You think you need tongs or something, slightly more delicate tools, not a hammer, but somehow or another, they're grasping, this cat is grasping a hammer, so they've made this delicate and beautiful rose using an anvil and hammer, apparently. That's kind of the sense we're getting here, which is in and of itself extremely impressive. Extremely impressive. Somehow, using a hammer, they've created a rose, which is intense symbolism in and of itself. Um, and kings are assigned the kings in the tarot, if I can talk, are naturally aligned with their realm of leadership. They're born to do it. The kings represent someone who is in their element. They are perfectly aligned with where they are. They know exactly what they're doing. They are primed to do it. They're basically a fish in water, not out of water. They know exactly. They instinctively know what it is they're doing, and they can get it done with perfect ease. So, and now because they are rulers, they also have the responsibility of the fact that all eyes are on them, so they have to be very good at what they do, which they naturally are. But there's always a pressure on the kings as the rulers and the leaders to be up to par constantly because all eyes are on them. So they're not like the queens who are very good at what they do but are kind of more in the background. They're up front and center. The kings are more up front and center, and everybody's looking to them. So, and as we've talked about before, the court cards are not gender based at all. You can be a female king, you can be a male king, you can be a non binary king, you can be a gender fluid king, you can be gender non conforming king. That's why I tend to switch pronouns back and forth as I can. So the kings, they're used to getting the slight shadow with the kings is because they're so good at what they do and because they're so naturally in this leadership role of um, going forward, doing what they do, they're not used to being questioned. They're used to getting their way without any questions asked. So if you think of, say, for example, the the head boss of a company, I'm thinking probably managerial role or a CEO or something. If she's walking through and she's got business written all over her, she's in her heels, she's click clacking, she's got her entourage following, and she is like, okay, I need this done, I need that done, you get such and such to get on this, whatever. Like, just put that image of your mind of the boss CEO just walking down the hall with the entourage of her assistants, and she is like snapping her fingers, giving details, and like, what is going on here, what is doing this, and everybody's looking in awe, and they're just like, whoa, boss is coming, get your head down, start writing, doing your job. Like, you don't mess with, you do not question. And if somebody comes up and like, if say it's like the boss asks, she's like, I need this done, this done, this done, and they're like, well, what about this? Or like, well, doing this could mess with that, and people just kind of stop and like, you question. She turns around, she goes, this is where you could get your bad king or your good king. And this is either the good king is like, get me is if this is a reasonable question, they're gonna be like, okay, then fix it. How else? How? Give me ideas. How would it be better to do this? How would this work? Bad king is gonna be the, no, I fucking said so. Now, granted, if it's a bad questioning of it where it's like, no, you don't have all the details, so you're like, well, what about this, which could be affected by this? And they're like, if the king's already thought of all that, they might sit there and go, yeah, I've already thought of that, and I've already gone through that, and it's also associated with this, this, and this, so do what I tell you. But more than likely, they're not going to go into detail. The kings are going to be like, no, I want this done. I got my reasons. They're not going to bother explaining to their underlings. They're very much do not question them. Walking through that, like, boss bitch. That are what the kings are. That's what the kings are. They are serious. Um, they're strong rulers. They're mature. And that whole vision of I've already thought of all this, and you might be questioning this based on this, but there's also these 5 other things. They're macrocosmic. They're looking at the big picture. They're not concerned too much. They're not overly concerned with the tiny details. They're like, I need this block connected to this block, connected to that block, connected to this block. Whereas you're like, well, in this block, there are these 60 different little blocks. They're like, okay, that's your job. My job is how this big block connects to this big block. They're looking at the big picture, not the details. They assign the details to their underlings or to their queens, as you will. Queens are a little bit more associated with the smaller details, with the smaller universe, the microcosm. They're like, we've got all these things in between. The king's like, okay, you take care of that. You're one of my queens. You deal with the details. I got the big picture in front of me. So they can come off as very ruthless in that way, but they're also extremely selfless in the fact that they're looking out for all their people, for their kingdom, for their business, for their company, what have you. The kings are ruthless. So like in this picture of the Black Cat Tarot, we've got this king who has used a hammer to create a rose. So we have kind of that detail of they're looking at the macrocosm, at the big picture. They're using a hammer to create it because they've got a lot to do with it. And out of all this macrocosm, they have managed to create a beautiful, delicate, detailed rose, even using a hammer. So looking at the big picture, but also to a degree, the details and the small things. They assign their queens, their knights, and their pages to deal with the details. So It's an interesting, I'm not quite sure how to put it into words. It's just very much a strong feeling of using a sledgehammer to create a delicate rose is just some very fascinating symbolism, and not something I can really put into words. So we'll leave it at that. Just I encourage you to kind of like take that image and just kind of sit with it, like integrate it, like a sledgehammer to create a rose, an iron wrought rose. But anyway, we gotta move on. So next up is our celestial, and as y'all know, celestial does not always correspond to the traditional astrology associated with the tarot cards. So again, this is it, and we've seen it with the last three, the Knights, Queens, and Pages actually too. But so in the celestial tarot, the King of Wands is associated with cardinal fire of Aries, which makes sense. So the Aryan spirit of excuse me, of adventure, heroism, and leadership. So we've got a red-headed king here, a very puffy beard and hair, sitting on his goldstone throne with the wand. He's wearing like kind of a pale yellow tunic with a red cloak. He's got a ram lying beneath his feet, and beneath that ram is, can't really see it on here, but it is maybe you can. There we go. It's actually very hard to see in general. It's like a round stone thing, but it's got, you can kind of see detail. There's a serpentine dragon there. Yeah, it's really hard to see on the camera. It's a bit brighter on the card itself. So it's basically, they call it a serpent. It's like a Eastern dragon type deal, but like kind of think what's his name from Mulan, the dragon from Mulan. Why can't I think of his name? Mushu. Think Mushu from Mulan. That's kind of what this serpent looks like. Looks like Mushu, except for not quite as comical. Of course, we've got our symbols of fire, Aries, and Mars, all scattered about, and he's just sitting in here. So they associate the King of Wands with Aries, because the Aries, as the cardinal fire, is the leader, the one who jumps into action, the one that goes and gets stuff done. It's like, okay, let's move ahead, let's go do stuff. As we'll remember from last month, Aries is also associated in traditional astrology with the Queen of Wands as opposed to the King. Which, but in the celestial, the Queen of Wands is associated with Leo, the fixed fire sign, which in traditional astrology, the King of Wands is associated with. So, but yeah, so they switch the kings and queens in celestial, basically. But anyway, let's focus on this. The King of Wands, so in Aries, cardinal fire, it tends to act on impulses and beliefs, on their own impulses and beliefs. They're just like, you know what, I need to go get stuff done. This looks cool, let's go do this. And in that impulsivity, they inspire their followers. They inspire others to action through just their energy, their inner fire and passion. They have little tolerance for uncertainty and absolutely no tolerance for weakness. They're like, nope, it's time to go get this done. Let's get this done. Go, 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 go. I've even got that with my freaking leg is, you know, how it sits there and bumps up and down. Yeah, they're both doing that, or one after the other. All right, so now in this, in Aries, there is the shadow of impatience of the, no, we got to go do it now. And it's like, hold your fucking horses. You got to take a second and actually like plan this out a little bit. So, so the King of Wands and Cardinal Fire of Aries draws their passion and their fire out of their strong instinctual life. And that'll come up more. The King of Wands is very instinctual. Aries itself is very much an instinct-driven, like, I got a gut feeling, let's go for it. Let's go do this. Let's move ahead, just get going. Go, 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 go. So that's kind of the cardinal fire associated with the celestial deck. And I can see it, I can feel it a bit. The king's a little bit more impatient, a little bit more driven than, say, the fixed fire of Leo. But to bring that in traditional Hermetic astrology, the King of Wands is associated with 20 degrees of Cancer to 19 degrees of Leo. So that the drawing in that home stability, that homeliness, and cardinal energy. There is cardinal energy because Cancer is a cardinal sign. So drawing on those last dregs of that home implementation-based energy of water energy of Cancer into the fixed steady sign of Leo, the first two decans of Leo, basically 0 to 19 degrees. So 20 degrees of Cancer to 19 degrees of Leo is what is the Hermetic astrological associations of the King of Wands in, Hermetical astrology. Wow. That was a lot of words to say one simple thing. Whew. Yeah, you can kind of get an idea of this energy is very forceful and moving and fiery. Like, Leo might be a fixed sign, but it's still a fire sign. It's still energy pushing forward. And now in the Hermetical, in the tarot and astrology book I have, kings are associated with air as opposed to like, say, or it all elemental associations of court cards are kind of a it depends on what you feel. They're kind of an intuitive, personal based. Some people associate that. Now in the Hermetic, I believe this comes from traditional Hermetic Kabbalistic leanings, in which the kings were associated with the top world. No, wait, that would be fire. Okay, so maybe not. Because fire, air, water, earth is the way the Kabbalistic tree of life is associated with elements outside of the actual Judaic mysticism, because as far as I know, actual Judaic mysticism doesn't associate with Western elements of the fire, air, water, earth. Western European scholars stole the Kabbalah and stuck it into their alchemy, basically. So, and it's been so many hundreds of years, they're all wrapped up together, but, and they do have their, kind of cross. You can apply them just because they're kind of universal truths that comes through in many different ways, is how I look at it, and it's kind of hard to detangle what European scholars did to the Kabbalah from everything else, because they tended to, what's the word? It starts with an A, appropriate. They tended to appropriate a lot of different mystical traditions and turn it all into their own little thing. And that turned into what we have now, which is they're all tangled together and created as a single pillar of, they're basically this giant entangled pillar at this point that draws from many different sources into many different ancient sources into a single pillar, which we're slowly separating, but they're also so tied together at this point that they're kind of inseparable. But it's like a pillar made of a bunch of different threads that are all tangled and entwined together. It's like we can pick out the separate threads and see where they go, but at the same time, they're now so highly associated with each other that it's kind of impossible to deappropriate it, basically. I mean, you can in the fact that you don't have to recognize any of these threads as, like, for example, because they did um, the Hermetic Order of the Golden, or the European quote mystics unquote. Well, actually, really not in quotes. They were kind of the mystics. They're occultists. That's what I want. The European occultists did appropriate from so many different sources to create their own understanding of the cosmos. You could ignore the different threads, but they are still there. They're still in existence, and we can't really completely cut them out anymore at this rate. It's been long enough, I guess. So, but the most we can do is recognize what happened. And know that it wasn't originally built from that, and their whole, oh, this is the ancient order of the cosmos and it all comes through in many different types and it's all based on gods whatever or other. It's bullshit. If you want a pretty good detailed and thorough history of the tarot, actually I recommend Brina Guerin's Hex Positive podcast. The episode is called The Trouble with Tarot. It's actually a very good, she did some very good research. She's a little salty, but it's also fun. And so if you want a good, simplistic, straight lay down on all cards on the table, understanding of the history of tarot, I recommend The Trouble with Tarot by Brina Guerin on the Hex Positive podcast. Seriously good. But anyway, getting back to this astrology thing. Um, so Cancer, Leo, fire and air, forceful and brave, and kind of associations with astrology. So Leo, forceful, brave. It's associated with the Strength card. That fixed fire, it's built up and it's not going anywhere, and it's except for where it wants to go. It's also kind of a source of light and inspiration for the leadership. Leo is very much a leadership, way more so than I think even Aries is, because Aries is more of a pioneer. They don't care who follows them, who comes along with them. They're just going forward, head first into things. Whereas the king is a leader, the one who they're looking out for their people. And he's like, you know what, I've got all these people that I have to take care of and I have to build up, which is more strongly associated with fixed signs, who are the builders, the founders. They build up. They don't build out or move on, they build up. And expand a bit, because as we know, the queens are more about the details, the filling in. The kings are more about the expansion and growth of kings are more about expansion and growth, whereas the queens are more about the detail and the fill in and growth, two different sides of growth. And I haven't even shown you the card I've got for this. So I've got my vice versa tarot, which is our king, again, redheaded, bushy beard, kind of that very Celtic-y look here. He's sitting on a throne of wooden staves here, which is the same type of stave that he's holding, except for his stave is actually cut off. It's a bit more like a club than a stave. And the arms of the chair are actually knotted wood roots. Wood roots. And he's sitting on the ground. He's got a salamander laying at his feet, of course, because the King of Wands is very strongly associated with the salamanders. And we'll get more into that in a bit. Now, this is the vice versa, so there's a front and a back, or this side and a that side. So that side, it's at night. He's still sitting on the throne. It's at night, and we can see that there's a giant oak tree in front of him, or, well, a giant tree of some form. I don't actually know if it's an oak. And there is a giant freaking snake wrapped around that tree. Like, huge ass snake that is coiling around it and kind of looking upwards towards the sky. He's not looking at the king. You get the feeling that the snake is a representation of that king's power of transformation. And if we'll remember, in our celestial, we also had not only a ram, but also the serpent. So again, with that serpent symbolism of transformation, of earthy solidity, because serpents, snakes in general, are associated with the earth element. They're very grounded. They're chthonic in that they're associated with the underworld, with death and transformation, rebirth. They shed their skins. They shed the old to transform into the new. It's very much more and more symbolism coming through here. Because, well, tarot's all about symbolism and stories. So, as the astrological sign of Leo is not only forceful and brave about its growth and expansion, it's like this huge frickin' bonfire. It's also a source of light and inspiration for others. So again, we've got that leadership quality that's more associated with kings. They're not afraid to stand at attention or be the center of attention. Like the King of Wands, Leos are all about being the center of attention, being in the midst of things. They're um, they're at the center of it, but we do have to remember there's a bit of that Cancer in there, which is a little more homely, a little bit more like I don't want to be seen. So even though they're good with being at the center of attention, the King of Wands is a little bit more recluse, a bit more holding their own counsel as opposed to out and about in the midst of things. The tarot and astrology books describes this card, the King of Wands, as the most charismatic of kings. They're inspiring, give voices to their followers' deepest heart desires. Um, they're they're just inspirational and standing at the center, being that big bonfire that's like, I am here, I'm in the midst. You may not always recognize me because a bonfire doesn't really move, but you dance around me, I inspire you. Now, in that, the shadow of that is that they can be egotistical and egocentric. It's like, I'm the big one here. I'm in the middle. You pay attention to me. I'm the most important one here. They can be a bit dramatic. We have that Leo energy of the shadow can be a bit dramatic, a little bit dictatorial as a king, a little bit of a dictator occasionally. Aggressive and explosive, won't hesitate. And the thing about the King of Wands, that sturdy shadowness, that sturdiness, as you can kind of see here, that groundedness is they also are not afraid to, won't hesitate to, and employ a scorched earth policy. Burn it all down and start over again. This is going nowhere. We're gonna shut it down and just start over. We're just gonna rebuild. Fuck it. Not gonna try to fix it. We're just gonna say, okay. They understand the purifying and cleansing power of fire to just burn everything away, and the renewal properties to bring new growth from that scorched earth policy. So, and honestly, as I was reading through this, it's not the best association I'd like to make with this King of Wands because I don't want to put anybody off of this card, but it has to be said because we cannot look at just the good of any card. We can't just look at the light of any card. We also have to look at the shadow, at the dark side, at the not so good stuff. Reading through the description of this card in the tarot and astrology book very, very, very strongly reminded me of Trump. Former President Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump. Yes, I know. Absolute worst possible thing I could say. I wouldn't put fault to anybody for just going, nope, shutting things off. If you feel the need to do that, I respect that. But I don't think that we can put aside the shadow. Donald Trump was very much a shadow aspect of America, of the United States of America. And there are probably others. Putin, what? Is it Putin? Now I can't remember his name. The Russian dictator dude. Um, I think it is Putin. Um, no, it's not. I'm saying it wrong. I know I'm saying it wrong. Is it? I forget. But kind of the same deal. That strong, charismatic um, center of attention. Donald Trump was very much the shadow side of this King of Wands, charismatic but explosive and aggressive, um, egotistical and egocentric. However, the other part of this, the reason I really strongly associate, the first thing that came to mind was the fact that they give voice to their followers' deepest desires. We saw the worst of some of our human associates. For example, my aunt is a diehard Trumper who apparently there's a fucking thing where they're like the people who've been vaccinated need to be put into quarantine camps, aka let's call it what it is for the neo-Nazis out there, concentration camps, so they can't infect polite society. Donald Trump was a culmination and a voice to the worst of some of our fellow Americans' desires. And now that it's been given voice, it's just going to grow and explode. It's just gotten bigger. I think it's gone beyond Trump. He's just a figurehead at this point. And much as I'd like to see him fall from power, something dastardly, I don't think he matters anymore. I don't think he doesn't matter anymore. He's just a figurehead. He was just the voice at this rate, and they now have their whatchamacallit, their deepest, darkest desires are thrown out for everyone to see, and that can be the shadow side of the King of Wands. Gives voice to their followers' deepest desires, be it good or bad, or whatever you want to call it. And I think he represents a King of Wands, especially in the worst kind of way, very strongly. Now, the reason why I was kind of hesitant to bring this up is because I don't want people to see every court card just in this court card in just its most negative light. That is not the case. This can be a good thing. This can be the person who fights for the underdog. We see it sadly a lot more in fiction than in real life, but it can be. Bernie Sanders is another one. Okay, if we think about Sanders he's again charismatic. He gives voice to the other extreme side of the political aisle, the political left, the extreme political left, in that no, we shut down all these concentration camps for the kids, for the immigrants. We um, socialism versus fascism, they're two sides of the same fucking coin. It's the extreme side, but it can be more it can be these extreme sides. It can also be more in the middle. The only example I can really think of that's a good one is Trump, but Sanders is probably another one. There's more. They're probably just not the ones we can think of on the biggest political spectrum. Gods, who could I think of? Captain America. Captain America would be good. No, actually, maybe no, not Stark. Captain America. Think Captain America, big political figure, the American dream embodied, World War II hero, charismatic. He creates amazing speeches. He's a symbol, especially in the not even just in the comics, but also in our life, as a symbol of the American dream, the underdog brought high. He was this lowly, sickly kid who, through his own grit and determination, became a superhero, the hero of America, who defeated the Nazis, who walks through with his head held high, inspiring others just by his very presence. That's another good example of the King of Wands is Captain America. Just an inspiring, charismatic leader who just leads by example. Yeah, and I'm sure we could come up with others, fictional, real. think of somebody who in your life or who you know of who is inspiring, charismatic, and who leads by example, doesn't always necessarily know they have followers, but they're willing to bring people along with them and to lift them up. I don't want the King of Wands just to be a bad name for you, just because the first person I could think of was one of the most horrible people who I would prefer never to exist, and most of his followers. But yeah. Anyway, I think I've beaten that to death, and we need to get a move on here. So next up is the Kabbalah, and this is another reason why I don't want this guy to get a bad rap, because Isabel Riddell Kleigeman, who's Tarot and the Tree of Life, who I follow, puts in her book is the King of Wands is the one card she has the worst relationship with court card that she has the worst relationship with, and I'm like, damn it. Excuse me. Talking too fast. The kings, as general in the Kabbalah or associated with Kabbalah, are associated with the highest evolved energy of their suit. So the king is the highest evolution of the suit. They represent the culmination of everything their suit stands for. They've gone through the ace through 10. They started as the page at the ace, and they went all the way through to the 10. They are the culmination of their suit. Now, and the card I have for this actually comes from my La Favole Tarot, which is a Marseille style or a Pip style deck. Marseille kind of based. It is a French deck. And the suits are not associated with any traditional tarot suits, so I named them based on the feelings I got from them. So this is actually the King of Butterflies, and I associate the butterflies with the Fire of the Wands, fire/air of the Wands suit, because some people do associate the Wands with air, and I, for some reason, associate butterflies a little bit more of fire than air, so do with that what you will. But anyway, Rey de Mariposas, the King of Butterflies, is very much kind of a distant looking dude. This is very much a goth associated deck, so he's goth vampire. He's got his pointy ears, possibly vampire. He's got blood dripping, yada yada, Victorian style clothing. He's kind of distant looking off. He's kind of distant and cold looking off, not really wanting to be seen. And the reason I brought this one very strongly, well, I kind of do it by intuition, by feel. I just grab whichever one feels strongest. But, well, I'll get to that in a bit. So the kings in the Kabbalah are associated with Asiya, the realm of action, which only has one Sephiroth. The only one in the Tree of Life, the only realm in the Tree of Life that has only one Sephiroth. All the rest have three. 3, 6, 9, 10. And that Sephiroth is Malkut, or kingdom. So Asiya, the realm of action, is only inhabited by the kingdom. The only Sephiroth associated with the physical realm. All the rest are all in the mind, soul, and the mind and the soul and the heart. Those are all pre-physical 3D realm. Malkut is the only kingdom physical doing feet on the ground, associated with the soles of the feet as opposed to anywhere else on the body. Like all the other Sephiroth associated with the chakras, the Malkut, the kingdom, is only associated with the soles of the feet. And I can't exactly like wrap my foot up to show you the soles of the feet much as I want to, because there's a table in the way and a chair, and that would be awkward, and I'm sure somebody would probably give me shit for that. I really want to, because I'm so used to show and tell. But anyway, so it's associated with action, the kingdom, earth. And that's why Isabel Radal Kleigman and me, by extension, because somewhat biased because I read her Kabbalah first, but also because just looking at the others, it's like, no, that doesn't make sense. In traditional Kabbalistic associations with the tarot, Kings are associated with Keter, the crown, the highest point. But that's the point where divinity comes into being. It's where the soul, the universe, starts existing. Which is, it's like, this is just the very beginning. You have no idea of all the troubles and trials and tribulations moving down through the tree to the final solid being. And it's like, kings are the culmination of their suit. So why would you put the culmination, the king that has gone through all of everything, has gone through all of it, with the Sephiroth that has gone through none of it? Why would you associate the kings with fire as opposed to the earth, the grounded, the doing? Because kings are the leaders, the ones who do things. So that's why I associate the kings with Malkut as opposed to Keter, and why she does that, and why I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense, because they're the ones down on the ground doing the stuff, leading, inspiring others to reach for that high point, their high point, because they're the highest point, the highest evolution, and they're constantly trying to do more. So again, the realm of action, of doing. So they're always inspiring others to get to their point. And in Jewish mysticism tradition, mystical tradition, the kingdom Malkut is actually the most important part. Whereas in like most Western mysticism, the highest attainable point is no physical at all. We've attained spiritual enlightenment. We don't need to worry about these physical bodies. It's the opposite in Jewish mysticism. They're like, God wanted to experience the physical, so this is the most important, and it's a whole thing, I guess. But I'm running low on time here. So the kings are associated with the realm of earth, the kingdom, the action, doing, the King of Wands, and that's why I put this card, is because I don't have the traditional RWS, Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And she points out in the RWS, in the Rider-Waite-Smith, that image of the King of Wands is, he's kind of looking off to, he's not even looking at us. He's looking off to the side. He's kind of inching his way out of the frame. It's like he's not interested in being looked at. Even this one is kind of, he's looking off to the side. He's like, yeah, okay, take my picture and then I'm gonna go, type deal. They're not, it's a constant, they're not expressive. This King of Wands is actually highly intuitive, but not very emotionally, unlike, say, the King of Cups. They're actually emotionally deficit. They're not very well emotionally evolved. King of Wands is all about the intuition, about the gut, about going with the feeling. They're not in their heart. They're not even really in their heads or in their bodies. They're in their soul, in their fire, in their energy, in their passion. So they're emotionally deficit. They're maybe not fully paying attention to their body. They're really not all that in. They're a little bit more in their head than they are anywhere else, but, well, than they are the former two. But even that is just because it's so in tune with their gut, with their intuition, with their soul. Whatever's in their head is all of their head, heart, and body. That takes a bit of a back seat as opposed to their intuition, as opposed to their passion and their soul and their fire. That is where the King of Wands is. That's where the wands are. Wands are all about our intuition, our passion, our soul desire, our soul mission, our soul expression. Wands are about the spirit and the soul. And that is where the King of Wands is. It's the culmination, the highest evolution of intuition, of soul, and passion. So they're really not there emotionally or even really mentally or physically. They're like, yeah, okay, great, moving on, I gotta go. So they're not interested in us. The King of Wands is in this card. He's not interested in us. He's looking off in the distance. He's got a mission. And the other thing she points out in the King of Wands and the RWS symbolism, so the wands are associated a lot with salamanders. And the King of Wands, as we saw, like here, he's got a salamander kind of curled up around him. But in RWS, the King of Wands is the only one with the salamander symbolism, where instead of it being in a line, like stretched out, it's circled back into itself and actually eating its tail, like the Ouroboros snake, which eats its tail. Its energy constantly cycling back into itself. The King of Wands is focused on himself, which harkens back a little bit more to Aries as opposed to Leo, astrologically, where it's like I'm more interested in myself and being the leader and going forward and pioneering a little bit, and just people come along by accident type deal. Even if we think in that CEO energy, it's like they're moving ahead. People do what they say. They're not interested in listening to you talk. The corporate businesswoman, she's striving ahead. She's got telling her assistant what to do, and you don't question. Otherwise, everybody holds their breath because you questioned them. You questioned him. Oh, Satan, save us, type deal. So it's kind of that energy of where they may sit there and go, good point, take care of it. Or they may go, don't question me. Shut the fuck up. Do what I said. Could go either way. And you never know which. Because King of Wands is all about just moving forward with that power and vitality. And in a way, because Leo, they are also a beacon. And it's that fixed energy and a little bit of that Cancer self-containedness. All right. Damn, these court cards are taking a bit. This is going the same way as the Queen of Wands did. All right. Next bit is, of course, the Kabbalistic Angel, which is Daniel, or Daniel, whose name means God the Merciful Judge. Daniel is a principality, so he is the 7 out of 9, so the third tier of angels. So there's 3 hierarchies or 3 tiers of angels. There's the first 3, which are close to God, the next 3, which are kind of in the middle, and the lowest 3, which are closest to humanity. So principalities are kind of, they've got archangels and angels under them. So it's angels are the lowest, archangels are the next, the chief angels, and then the principalities are in charge of that. So Daniel is a principality, 7 out of 9 on the hierarchical scale. Daniel provides consolation, and he rules over. He provides consolation and obtains God's mercy, or God's quote mercy, quote God's mercy, unquote. And you can see here, Daniel, he's standing here. He's in full armor, bareheaded, however, with wings, and his staff is kind of like a ruling staff up top, where it's got kind of the cross of the ruler or the religious head of the church type deal. However, the bottom of it is a spear, not a sphere, a spear, which is a spear tip. So this can be a weapon. This symbol of leadership and rule can also be a weapon, and it's apparently been used in that because it is bloody. And the blood actually kind of goes part of the way up the spear. So this is a ruler who can also. This is not only a ruler in times of peace, but also a ruler in times of war. So Daniel. So that's an interesting angel to put as interesting. He rules over obtaining God's mercy as well. It's 2 sides of the same: the cross of peace and the spear of war. Which makes sense because Daniel actually rules over justice, councils, attorneys, and magistrates, anything to do with the courtroom. So think the justice card very strongly here. This is an interesting angel for this, because if the King of Wands is more strongly associated with intuition, and the courtroom is associated much more strongly with logic and reason. But at the same time, because Daniel helps obtain God's mercy, there's a little bit more intuition here and a little bit more warrior-like, as opposed to strict rational justice. It's like justice with a little bit more intuition. And it's like justice. This is not the guy you actually have in the courtroom, but he's kind of, you do and you don't. It's more like the bailiff, as opposed to, I think it's more a little bit more of bailiff energy as opposed to the actual like court, or he's the one that rules over the court. It's like the king at the head of the court whose say is final, and how no matter what the court is deciding, if he comes in with a no, I don't believe that, such and such, it's final say. They've got to change their. He's not in charge of the jury. There's no jury here. He is the jury type deal. Those born under Daniel will be industrious and active in business. So again, that business CEO type deal. Love literature and distinguish themselves with eloquence. So cool. Again, with that kind of CEO energy. Daniel is the soul guardian for those born 4:20 to 4:40 p.m. The physical guardian of those born November 20th to 24th, and the moral guardian for those born February 20th, May 8th, July 19th, September 29th, and December 10th. Daniel, quite the interesting, the merciful judge. Yeah, merciful judge, that would require a bit more intuition than logic and rationality, I suppose. Alright, the being associated with the King of Wands in their fantasy world tarot is Anubis, the psychopomp of the dead, not the god of the dead. So the god of the dead in Egyptian mythology is Osiris. He's the ruler, the king of the dead, the ruler of the dead. Anubis is the jackal-headed god of the embalming process. He helps prepare the dead. He rules over preparing the dead. He is the psychopomp. He brings the dead down to the underworld. He guides the dead. He guides the dead. He prepares them, he guides them, and then he places their heart on the scales, and the scale of Ma'at. And he is the son, actually, of Osiris and Nephthys. And I have a shit ton of Wikipedia shit. Probably should pull this up already. Gallery, because I just took tons of pictures. So Anubis, or Inpu, Anpu, or Anpu in ancient Egyptian, is the Greek name of the god of death, mummification, embalming, the afterlife, cemeteries, tombs, and the underworld. In ancient Egyptian religion, usually depicted as a canine or a man with a canine head. Archaeologists have identified Anubis' sacred animal as an Egyptian canid, the African golden wolf. The African wolf was formerly called the African golden jackal until a 2015 genetic analysis updated the taxonomy and the common name for the species. As a result, Anubis is often referred to as having a jackal head, but this jackal is now more properly called a wolf. Fascinating. All right. So Anubis is assumed different roles in various contexts, depicted as a protector of graves as early as the First Dynasty. Anubis was also an embalmer. By the Middle Kingdom, he was replaced by Osiris in his role as Lord of the Underworld. So he was originally the ruler of the underworld, but when Osiris was killed by Set, Osiris became the king of the dead because he was originally pharaoh. So Anubis basically stepped down from his position as ruler, and Osiris took over. Probably because Osiris was more of a king, and Anubis was a protector of the dead, a guardian of the dead. So he probably didn't want to rule the dead. He was probably more happier just being their guardian and protector. As a wolf, wolves, as we know, are very associated strongly with family and protection and guardianship, more so than ruling. So he was, one of his prominent roles was as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. He attended the weighing scale during the weighing of the heart, in which it was determined whether a soul would be allowed to enter the realm of the dead. So despite being one of the most ancient and one of the most frequently depicted and mentioned gods in the Egyptian pantheon, Anubis played almost no role in Egyptian myths. So he kind of liked to keep to himself, which again falls very well with the King of Wands, because the King of Wands is very much more intuitive, just wants to lead and full ahead, doesn't really want to be seen and looked up to is what we're getting more of a feeling of, even with that Leo fixed fire association of being the center of attention and being dramatic. There are also the more health that egocentrism is a little bit more the shadow unhealthy aspect, and the drama is more the unhealthy side. Whereas in the healthy aspect of the King of Wands, they're a little bit more reserved, don't want to be seen as much. So Anubis was depicted in black, a color that symbolized regeneration, life, the soil of the Nile River, and discoloration of the corpse after embalming. Anubis is associated with his brother Wepwawet, another Egyptian god portrayed with a dog's head or in canine form with gray or white fur. Historians assume that the two figures were eventually combined. Anubis's female counterpart is Anput. His daughter is the serpent goddess Kebeshet. So again, we get that serpent mythology association. Anubis is a Greek rendering of God's Egyptian name. The god, before the Greeks arrived in Egypt around the 7th century BCE, God was known as Anpu or Inpu. The root of the name in ancient Egyptian language means a royal child. Inpu has a root to Inp, which means to decay. God was also known as the first of the Westerners, Lord of the sacred land, he who is upon his sacred mountain, ruler of the 9 bows, the dog who swallows millions, master of secrets, he who is in the place of embalming, and foremost of the divine booth. Name. So in Egypt's early dynastic period, Anubis was portrayed in full animal form with a jackal head and body. A jackal god, probably Anubis, is depicted in stone inscriptions from the regions of Hor-Aha, Jer, and other pharaohs of the First Dynasty. Since pre-dynastic Egypt, when the dead were buried in shallow graves, jackals have been strongly associated with cemeteries because they were scavengers which uncovered human bodies and ate their flesh. In the spirit of fighting like with like, a jackal was chosen to protect the dead because a common problem and cause of concern must have been the digging up of bodies shortly after burial by jackals and other wild dogs which lived on the margins of cultivation. The parentage of Anubis varied between myths, times, and sources. In early mythology, he was portrayed as son of Ra. In the coffin texts, which were written in the first intermediate period, Anubis is the son of either the cow goddess Heset or the cat-headed Bastet. Another tradition depicted him as the son of Ra and Nephthys. The Greek Plutarch stated that Anubis was the illegitimate son of Nephthys and Osiris, but that he was adopted by Osiris's wife Isis. For when Isis found out that Osiris loved her sister and had relations with her and mistaking her sister for herself, and when she saw a proof of it in the form of a garland of clover that he had left to Nephthys, she was looking for a baby because Nephthys abandoned it once after it had been born for fear of Seth. And when Isis found the baby, helped by the dogs, which with great difficulties led her there, she raised him, and he became her guard and ally by the name of Anubis. So George Hardis sees the story as an attempt to incorporate the independent deity Anubis into the Osiris pantheon. An Egyptian papyrus from the Roman period simply called Anubis the son of Isis. In Nubia, Anubis was seen as the husband of his mother Nephthys. And the Ptolemaic period, Anubis was merged with the god Hermes, becoming Herma Anubis. Two gods are considered similar because they both guided souls to the afterlife. Now that's interesting because Hermes is also associated with the Egyptian god Thoth, because he's the god of wisdom and writing. So we see again how Hermes has many different roles. He was associated with 2 Egyptian gods, but whew. Anyway, this is turning into a very, very long video. But I think that kind of sums up the Anubis. He's got actually quite a lot of interesting roles and history associated with him. So, but anyway, we kind of see that whole more a reserved leader. He was the ruler of the dead. Now he's just the guardian of the dead because he didn't really quite fit the kingly role per se, with that deep intuition. And honestly, think I've said all I can say on that. Especially since I'm like going way over the hour I try to keep this at. What time is it? 12:16. Shit. Damn. Alright, so our final bit for the traditional association, we've got the King of Bones here from the Supernatural deck, which is Metatron, the scribe of God, who decided in the Supernatural series, he decided he was going to set himself up to be the new God. That was an interesting thing. He was one of the, whoops, sorry about that. One of the most hated villains of Supernatural, who eventually redeemed himself because they all fucking do. Everybody's like, God damn it, why'd you do this to us? We wanted to hate him. He ends up sacrificing himself for some greater cause. It's actually kind of heart-wrenching, which most of Supernatural is, and everybody was pissed about that, but also... Damn guy. Alright. But he was kind of a full of himself, egocentric asshole for most of the time, who eventually did end up, like, putting himself aside and sacrificing himself for the greater good. Some of the keywords associated with the King of Wands in traditional sense are, well, he's associated with Leo, obviously. The entrepreneur is the keyword that your tarot court has for the King of Wands, is that he's the archetype of the entrepreneur. Hot-headed, daring, driven, visionary, challenging, committed, tenacious, disruptive. For the entrepreneur, life is not about being part of the 9-to-5 rat race. It's about doing what they want to do, about going forward. King of Wands is seen as very hot-headed, driven, a bit of both that Leo and that Aries. They're fire. They want to go forward and go do their own thing. Bit full of themselves, but also they're just kind of doing what they want to do. They're giving a voice and leading those that want to follow, but also they don't need any followers. They're just going to go forward and do what they want to do. And that is the King of Wands. There's a lot this episode. So next month we start with a new tarot suit, which is the Swords. Go to the Swords next month. Woohoo! Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this. Hope it was informative. Hope most of you didn't end up, those of you who managed to stick past the difficult part, kudos and thank you. And yeah, so usual outro shit is, like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube. Find me on Facebook at Bags and Omens. Email me at bagsandomens@gmail.com if you have any questions. Find me on Patreon if you feel like throwing money at me. It's always appreciated. And other than that, I hope y'all have a good rest of your whatever it is, and I will see you next week with a new introduction, a new section of astrology moving through. Alright, so see y'all later. Bye.